When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Welcome to In Transit for this Monday. It's one of the newest examples of public transit infrastructure in the city. The SRB-P9, a $500 million rapid transit corridor that runs along P9 Boulevard. It went into service last November after a decade in the works. The rapid transit corridor works without the interference of cars and with priority for traffic lights. It has 13 stations located in long bus shelters in the middle of the road and more to come. It also promises to speed up travel time by about 30%. And among this was the promise of universal accessibility. But since its opening, it seems that promise has yet to be fulfilled. With more on this, we go to Jason Magder from the Montreal Gazette. He's their transportation and civic affairs reporter. Jason, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Elias.
So I know you spent the time doing the tour of the various P9 stops on the line. What did you find?
Well, we spent the time is a good description because I have to thank Magder from Rapplic, the group that advocates for better mobility. He and I got on and got off at every single stop along the way, and I didn't know what to expect because if you're not in a wheelchair, you don't know what the challenges are. And the first thing he noticed is that the ramps between the sidewalk, basically the space between the sidewalk and the road, there's about a 1-inch gap. For you and me, that doesn't seem like anything too dramatic, but for someone who has a wheelchair, that's an impossible barrier, he tells me. People with manual wheelchairs, even people with some heavier electric wheelchairs, they can't get over that. So what that means is basically people crossing the streets to get to some of these stations, they can't actually get to the stations because of these ramp problems.
Jason, here's my question. It's not the 1960s, right? In the 1960s, accessibility was never thought of, right? In this city, it seems like, and we see it with, the new metros and how they've tried to readapt older metro stations here. Obviously low-floor buses. It seems like we're now at the point, if you're going to design something new, it has to be 100% accessible. How could something like this, how could the ball have been dropped on this for a project that launched in November of 2022, not 1962?
That's a very good question, especially since the first station that was put into place as a testing ground. And it wasn't put into place a few months ago. It was basically used to test out the kinks of this whole system for a number of years, not months. And even at that station, we noticed two of the ramps getting to the street or to the stations themselves were not what Martin would call universally accessible. It had the same barriers we were talking about. In fact, 5 of the 13 stations, so more than 1/3 of the stations that are in right now, and there are more that are supposed to come online, but 5 of the 13 had the same failings that we saw.
And it wasn't just ramps that don't meet the sidewalk. There were some other curious design choices made at these stations. What else were you alerted to?
Yeah, well, again, no one would notice or make any fuss about a small box that contains, I think it contains road salt to make sure the stations are free of ice. But those boxes at every single station are at the same spot, and they happen to be in the spot where people are going to be walking. So not a big deal for you and me, but someone who is visually impaired might stumble on this. Martin said this should be, there is actually space for these boxes to go where people are not walking, but they chose not to put them there. Also, there are these emergency phones for people who need help, probably maybe people who can't get off of the ramps onto the street. There are these emergency phones, but if you're in a wheelchair, they're a little bit too high for you. So you can't really actually make a call if you're in a wheelchair, especially if you have mobility issues with your arms. They're very hard to reach. And all these were very well spelled out by Martin when we were doing this.
And let me tell you something, Jason. Along with your piece and the words of your piece, it's accompanied by some terrific photos by John Mahoney of the Gazette as well. And there's one photo that just points out for visually impaired people, that box you were talking about, it's a light gray, the same color as the concrete used in the station. And you see in the photo just how difficult it would be for someone who's got some visual challenges to even see that box. Now, has the STM responded on to making changes, to making it better, to fulfilling the promise of accessibility?
Well, two things about the STM. First of all, you have to give them a little bit of credit because we followed Martin Dion a few years ago when we were talking about buses, and the ramps on the buses never used to work properly. It used to be about 25 to 30% of the ramps, sometimes even 50% of the ramps. 50% of the ramps wouldn't work. When we took the SRB together, every single time Martin had to get on the bus, well, except for one time when the ramp had to be physically moved, but they all worked. So at least that's one solace. People on wheelchairs can get on the bus as long as there are no snowbanks, but like what we see today, blocking them. So that's one thing to the SDM's credit. But when we did contact them, they asked specifically for the pictures that I took on our journey, and I sent them to them. And they're going to send out teams to look at this and make improvements if they can.
And Jason, before I let you go, accessibility aside, what about the promise of the SRBP about time and making commuting easier along that corridor? Where do you think, do you think the STM has a success on that end?
Well, it's a very cool project, actually. And we've seen this project in other cities. This is the first time where we have something like this in Montreal. And it's a reserved lane. It sort of turns the bus into almost a small train where it basically can go right through the traffic without interruptions. The only problem is it's not finished, and there's a big construction zone in the middle of the whole project right now, which will be there for another few years. So it's not as rapid transit as you would like it to be, but it's coming.
Jason, thanks so much for coming on In Transit today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Elias.
That's Jason Magder from the Montreal Gazette. The story on the Gazette website, Montreal's P9 bus rapid transit corridor, not accessible to all. Go check it out so you can see those photos we were discussing as well.